Hello citizens and welcome back. In today's video I would like to do some theory crafting and real-life comparisons about supplying fleets and operations of various sizes in Star Citizen. As always, if you like this video, sacrifice a like and a comment to the YouTube algorithm and subscribe for more. And here's a shout out to our amazing patrons for their support of the channel and the Armory. Alright, so why are we talking about this? Well, Star Citizen is a simulation, and I think that logistics will be an essential part of most coordinated actions by the players. Now, we will talk about what exactly we are supplying the operations with in a minute, but I think it's safe to say that most coordinated efforts, from exploration and mining to combat operations, will require a supply chain. And there are and there will be groups and organizations dedicated to providing various parts of that supply chain to others. And of course, larger organizations will likely be able to do so in-house. And I think now is a good time to promote the organization that I am a part of, Atlas Defense Industries. At ADI, we actually have a whole division specializing in logistics, refueling, medical, and other support tasks for our operations. So if you're looking for a good place to play and learn, check us out at the link in the description. Okay, with that out of the way, let's talk about what fleets and operations need to be successful in terms of supplies. The first thing that comes to mind is of course fuel. Ships and presumably also bases will need fuel to stay operational. Now, fuel is commonly available at the moment, but that might not be true everywhere in the verse. Also, depending on what you're doing, you might not want your ships docking at stations to refuel to maintain your OPSEC, or simply because you can supply the fuel at a better price. For example, when transporting cargo through highly developed systems with high fuel prices, it might be cheaper to bring a starfarer with fuel from a cheaper area for refueling. Next, materials required to repair ships and spare parts. Again, these might be available at nearby stations, but for extended deployments in remote areas you will need to set up repair areas for your ships. You might also need the ability to tow or otherwise transport damaged ships to the repair areas. So I think that covers ship and facility needs. Now let's think about what the crew and personnel need. As much as ships need fuel, people need provisions, food, water, and equipment. Now, player characters may not be that resource intensive, but I imagine CAG will create some sort of a system of resource requirement for NPC crew and personnel. Crew and personnel also require medical attention. Injuries happen on all kinds of missions, so you need to have the ability to evacuate injured characters and deliver replacements to the area. And even if there are no medical emergencies, you might need to rotate personnel every once in a while. Though I can't imagine this would be a requirement for NPC crew. But for example, if you had a player crewed Orion mining in a remote area, you might not want to bring the ship back to port until its cargo hold is full, which might take longer than some players are willing to stay around for. Okay, so now we have a rough idea of what a fleet, a base, or a long-term operation will need. As I said before, some if not most of these tasks can be outsourced to other players. But for now, let's consider that you have a group big enough to do this yourself. So what ships can you use? Fortunately, many ships capable of logistics tasks can fulfill more than one role, so let's take a look. First up, fuel. We currently have 3 ships capable of carrying fuel and refueling: Starfarer, Starfarer Gemini, and the Vulcan. The Starfarer is a great option here because it can also carry cargo and ground vehicles along with fuel. Also, as far as I remember, it has some extra seats in the cargo hold which could be used to rotate personnel. On the other hand, I don't think the Starfarer will be suitable for refueling in all situations. It can only refuel 1 ship at a time, while the Vulcan can likely refuel at least 2. However, both will be useful in various stages of the supply chain, but we will get to that later. Next up, repair and rearm. Again, we can use the Vulcan and we can also use the Crucible. Now, it's not clear if the Crucible can rearm ships, but I would think it can. You will also need some transport ships to bring in the materials and the spare parts. This can be any cargo ship available, depending on how much supplies you need. Now, the Liberator comes to mind here, as it can carry cargo, replacement ships, and the crew can provide basic repairs and refueling. So it could be a good option for some types and sizes of operations. You could also argue that the Caterpillar, Karak, and Endeavor and some other modular ships could be used as well. But since we don't quite know what modules will be available yet, I will not include them. And of course we have to include the SRV for recovery operations and maybe to help with moving cargo. As far as bringing in replacement ships, depending on their size they might be able to fly in on their own. But smaller ships might need to be carried on a Liberator or a Kraken or similar ships. Next, supplies for the crew. Once again, any cargo ship will do depending on the amount of supplies you need to transport. This also applies to bringing in replacements and rotating crew, though the limitation there is that you need a ship that can also carry seated passengers. Moving on to medical services, we have several ships that can help here. The Cutlass Red, the Apollo variants, and the Endeavor, since we know it will have a hospital module. Okay, so now we know what we need and what ships we can use to get it where we need it. The next question is, how do we manage this effort? And this is loosely based on how different militaries and companies do this. The general model is more or less the same with some specifics for each. You also need to know what is needed where and when. And here's where the push and pull approaches come into play, but that's a bit out of scope for this video. So, assuming you know or can predict what supplies you need, your first steps will be to procure the needed items. You can do this by simply buying them from stores or other groups, or in case of fuel, manufacturing it yourself once the relevant gameplay is implemented. This would likely result in the supplies being stored at a safe site far away from the area of operations. So your next step would be to transport the supplies to a staging area closer to whatever you're doing. You can do this in bulk with large transport ships. This staging area could be a Lagrange station near a mining operation, or a built-up base near a combat zone, or possibly a large capital ship like the Endeavor. Of course, one staging area can support multiple ongoing operations. This is where your Starfarers, Caterpillars, and Liberators come in. They do the heavy lifting over long distances from one safe area to another. The next step would be distributing the supplies to your troops and workers. This is where smaller ships come into play. There is no reason to bring out the whole Starfarer to refuel a flight of fighters on patrol or a pair of prospectors mining. A Vulcan will do. Of course, trying to refuel a Reclaimer or an Orion would probably require a Starfarer, so it all depends on the missions and the ship you're supporting, but you get the idea. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, it appears that logistics will be a very big part of organized gameplay in Star Citizen, and I think that at some point solo players or smaller groups will require logistical support. In addition, with the implementation and gradual feature updates of Quanta, there will be NPCs generating requests for support such as medical, fuel, or towing services. This creates a great source of emergent gameplay in my opinion, and it seems that I am not the only one, as there are many groups that focus on various parts of the logistics chain and provide them as a service. And of course, I think there will be solo players or smaller groups doing the same on a freelance basis. And I actually wouldn't be surprised if even larger orgs outsource these tasks to such individuals or groups, because in some cases it might be cheaper than operating their own logistics. Okay, so we have the need, the people, and the ships. All we have to do now is wait for the relevant gameplay to get done and for more star systems to be available to make the whole system necessary. And with that being said, that's it for tonight. What do you think? Is logistics gameplay going to be a big part of Star Citizen? Do you plan to engage in logistics gameplay? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, fly safe, and I will see you in the verse.